Here we are tonight, and welcome everybody to the town board meeting of Tuesday, October 30th, 2018. We're meeting a little earlier tonight because we have our volunteer appreciation dinner at 6:30. So we're gonna have a very short meeting, and then we're gonna head over to our volunteer appreciation dinner. So the only thing on our agenda is actually a proposed local law enacting a moratorium for the Chapakua Business Hamlet. And we're gonna start off with, we've been talking about an RFP for zoning changes in the hamlet. I know that the planning board has appointed a member, Greg Sanzari, who's been working with Sabrina over the past several months. So Sabrina's gonna give us a status on the RFP. And it's not ready to be released yet, but it all ties into this discussion.
Well, thank you, I'm happy to be here tonight to talk to you about this. As some of you know, there have been several downtown property owners who've come in to speak with me about plans that they have for their properties that are just not able to come to fruition under existing zoning. This is another example of the difficulty that property owners are having in, looking at future potential of their property. I know in the past with the adoption of the comprehensive plan, we set forth goals to increase housing type in the hamlet, to diversify our mix of residential and commercial uses in the hamlet. Those are some of your primary goals. This RFP, the draft RFP you have before you tonight, is part of that goal setting, the actions that you have agreed to take. And in discussions with those property owners, they're very much looking forward to changes to be made to commercial zoning in the hamlet so that they could maximize the potential of their properties to help us meet the goals within our comprehensive plan. The draft that you have before you is threefold. It calls for the creation of what we call a form-based zoning code. Right now in the Chapakua Hamlet, we have a Euclidean zoning base where we have properties that exist in a business retail zoning district, a business retail parking district. A form-based code actually looks at the design and the space that a building takes and calls for specific design characteristics as part of the zoning. So we've talked about design guidelines for the Chapakua Hamlet. A form-based zoning code incorporates design guidelines into speaking about how the building sits on the property in relation to the street. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a three-dimensional, if you will, prescription as to how the downtown should be developed. This gets to your points on character, it gets to keeping with the character of the existing community, it gives you controls over height, over setbacks from the streets, it gives you opportunity for public places, for entryways, for the amount of glass that's exposed in an entryway. It talks about residential uses in relation to commercial uses, and above all, creating new zoning in a form sense will provide new spaces that are more consistent with today's fire and safety needs. And as I believe I've spoken to you before, a lot of times, particularly in the building office, the town gets a bad name because applicants spend a lot of time in our building office. It takes a long time to get their building permits. Most of that time is spent meeting Westchester County public health and safety codes. A lot of our building stock is antiquated and it requires a lot of renovation and a lot of money to update space for restaurants and places where people gather. So a form-based zoning code will set forth standards that incorporate those new health and safety codes that we're always trying to incorporate into existing buildings and incorporate them into our zoning code so it enables a quicker turnaround on permitting processes. So I'm going to walk you through the draft code real quickly. I would like you to read through it in your own time, and maybe you guys can give some thought as to how long you will need to review it, because I do welcome your feedback. Greg Sanzari and I reviewed this, we worked on this. Legal has reviewed it as well. I'm happy to answer any questions tonight and at a later date if you want to schedule it on your agenda. So the first page, there's 10 pages to this RFP.
Let me just interject, I'm sorry, we will put this on the agenda for next week. to discuss, but please, give us a summary.
So the first page is really an introduction about Newcastle, some background information, talking about the comprehensive plan, talking about the 2014 public outreach process where we got a lot of the policies for the comprehensive plan and really sets the stage. The project request starts on page 2 of 10. This is where we give a general outline and specific bullet points as to what we are expecting out of this process. We are looking for a review of the BR retail business, the BRP retail business and parking, the BD design business, and the IP planned industrial zoning districts located within the Chappaqua Hamlet. The zoning map that you have before you will be provided as part of the RFP to give responders an indication of the areas that we're looking at. We are looking for new legislation, a form-based zoning code. It's a regulating plan, which includes design parameters and other tools to help us expedite and implement our vision for the community. We also would like the consultant to address other changes in the zoning code so that the form-based code will synthesize with our existing code and our existing processes, and specifically with our existing parking requirements. And we may need changes to parking, our parking sections of the code, to reflect this new form-based code. We are also asking the consultant to assess the impacts of the form-based code through a build-out analysis. We have spoken many times in this forum as to whether or not we are looking at 3 and 4 stories, 4 and 5 stories. What is that height and that visual that you want for the Chappaqua Hamlet? A build-out analysis conducted using a draft form-based code will help define that for you. Once you have identified your preference for that character and that height, we will conduct what's called a generic environmental impact statement. We will ask the consultant to develop a generic environmental impact statement and ground proof, if you will, the implementation of the form-based code that they are developing for us. So, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the code. On page 3, we talk about the scope of services. There are several tasks. The first, task 1, is an initial review and analysis. This is where the consultant gets to know the town. We talked about establishing a downtown working group of key representatives of the community to, provide feedback to this consultant to do the work. The public design process is set in my mind. It is a very short-term, 60-day process, several meetings, several exchanges of information to get a good base for which the consultant to incorporate into the comp plan, into the public outreach, into all the other work that we've done to create the basis for the form-based code. On page 3, we have the actual drafting process of the form-based code. There are specific bullets as to what the form-based code should consider. A regulating plan, the building form standards, the public space and street standards, which we have much, by the way, through our revitalization plan for our streetscape. So they would take what we've already done and incorporate it into this code. And then there are other standards that, as experts in form-based code development, they will advise us as to what they feel is best for our code. We then
Will they advise us on changes to our code?
This
Where our
is
code-
changes to our code. We are looking at rezoning. That means replacing the BR.
No, I just wanna make sure it's not to retrofit to our code, it's to
No.
recommend new changes.
No.
This
and in
is
fact,
replacement.
Sabrina has provisions in there that says you also need to look at the code to see what are the impacts to other sections of the code. For example, parking was a good
Correct.
example that you had in there. So we're talking about the zoning, let's look at other areas of the code that would be impacted by the changes you would implement.
Correct.
It's a
Collateral
forward-
Sabrina, are they
Yes.
giving us recommendations as to like the low, medium, high you were
Yes.
talking about?
The build
Or
out
is that coming from us?
No, the build out analysis will be delivered to you with 3 versions of low, medium, and high.
Got it.
Okay? The build out analysis will include 3D visuals, so you can see the street implementing what they're designing through the legislation. So a form-based code is very different than the code we have today. It includes a whole architectural element that needs to be incorporated into the codification to give you the character and
Scale.
the density, the scale of what you envision for the community, of what the community envisioned for the hamlet. Okay, so at the point that we get a draft code and we're going through the build-out analysis, the consultant will be meeting with you and demonstrating this. There'll be workshops set up so you can understand the differences in the codes in relation to the scale of what we're planning.
At what point do they provide that draft and those examples of low, medium, high? Like, when they've engaged with the public and then they've had this public design process and then they give us low, medium, high? I mean, what if through their engagement with the public and the design process, low isn't ever an option that's discussed, or
Then they
high
won't
isn't?
provide the low. There has to be some fluidity in working with the consultant. Again, this is a draft. If you feel that fluidity isn't here and you think the temporal order of some of these things, you have specific desires for that, I need to know that so I can build it into the RFP.
I just wanna make sure that we're not paying for them to go through a lengthy public process.
We are not talking
Only
about-
to come before the town board and have 5 members decide whether it's low, medium, or high. Like it really,
No,
I think,
right.
ought to come from.
There are 2 points of public discourse. The first is an interview of people who are intimately affected by these changes. The second is a broader public outreach to provide feedback on low, medium, high. Okay?
But we paid for that survey, we could
I
actually
think-
do 300 random calls to
Right.
people and
I
have a
think-
survey.
I think to a
That's,
certain
uh,
extent, one person's low and another person's low, or one person's high and another person's high could be 2 very different numbers. So I think to a certain extent, the 3D visualization
Will really help.
will help people understand it. Reacting to an abstract versus reacting to something concrete will make for a better
Yeah, we
public
talked
discussion.
about this at
you
for a
know,
while.
building owners logically would say, well, I want high because the more I can build, the more valuable my building is worth. Whereas residents, I'm assuming many want low because it's gonna impact the look of the town and the whole feel, and you don't want it to look like downtown White Plains, you want it to look like a cute little bucolic hamlet where we are.
Like Bronx.
So I think, or yeah, like Bronxville, they
Which
may
is-
say 3 to 4 stories is plenty. So it, you know, who are they talking to? Because I think merchants are pretty much all gonna be up here and a lot of residents are gonna be down
Which is
here.
why the presentation of these options needs to be pretty broad.
Yeah.
Okay, we had our public outreach and our comprehensive plan was community-wide. You know, we did meet with the hamlet, the chambers in both Millwood and Chappaqua. We know what they wanted, but we didn't get a dissimilar voice from the
Right.
rest of the community. What the rest of the community said was keep it in the hamlets, not in my single-family neighborhood, which is what your comprehensive plan says.
And they were also very kind of clear about what they wanted their hamlets to capture, the zeitgeist of the hamlet.
Correct, and so,
Yeah, so-
so that's the challenge, is that character. We are not a White Plains or a New Rochelle. We are Newcastle, New York. You know, we have 3% commercial land use. That's not gonna grow to
Well, it's growing. a little bit.
50%.
Right, but you're not gonna, the numbers are.
Right.
It's not gonna be
I'm just saying,
50% of our land
Even
use.
if you double.
Got it up to 5.
Right.
So let me bring you back.
Just saying.
Okay.
Task 4 is where we refine this. This is public presentation, and maybe you feel, after reading through this, we need to strengthen this a little bit. I need to hear from you. I need some guidance from you. Task 5 is where we take where we're leaning towards, we conduct the build-out analysis. And then we can build in another process here if you want to. We can change the order of task 4, task 5. You tell me. This is the first time we are talking about the mechanics of this. And task 6 is where a lot of the analysis comes into play in relation to producing a generic environmental impact statement. Task 6 is what does this do to how does this work with the high water table? How does this work with the size of our sewer pipes? So that's preparing the GEIS, which will then lead to task 7, the approval process. And this is public hearings, additional revisions based on the public input, and then we have a list of expected project deliverables.
Alright, so I just had one question, I mean, it all looked pretty thorough. But does the environmental quality review process require a different set of skills potentially than sort of the architectural kind of visualization skills? And perhaps if we wanna get the best of the form-based zoning, because I kind of feel that if they've done this right and correctly and have the background documents, that task, which, you know, takes time, maybe perhaps should be broken out and they have the option to respond to this. But maybe what we do is there's firms that specialize in doing this.
So, in response to that, this RFP asks for folks to combine their consultant teams, to create teams to address this. It also gives the town the ability to select different consultants based on their expertise.
Okay.
Okay? The Form-Based Codes Institute, which is located in the Midwest, they are the foremost author of form-based codes, okay? In our type of community, there's not a lot of form-based codes that have been written. A lot of the form-based codes right now are either in bigger cities for specific neighborhoods, or they're out in the Midwest. The Form-Based Code Institute has a list of consultants that specialize in form-based codes, because it's not just a planner and it's not just an architect, it's a team of professionals. Doing a steeper analysis is unique to New York State. So whether or not they will have the expertise.
No, that's fine, I just wanna make sure that as we go through this process, that internally we have some kind of calibration of the right person for
Correct.
the form-based zoning, the right person for the
You
secret.
may need to hire someone
Well,
else
we're
for
gonna-
the secret.
We're gonna talk about this next week.
Education and training that you were describing. We can talk about it offline.
So then the RFP includes the expected deliverables, and then it includes a section on submission requirements, what the proposal should contain when they're submitting to us.
Okay.
And then there's an evaluation page that gives them a sense of how we will evaluate them.
Oh, good.
And then there's administrative information.
Okay.
Okay,
So we
and-
have a week, we can look at
Yes.
this, we'll give,
And
we'll
then-
look
If you
at,
can
we'll
give
give
me
you a
feedback
comments
for next
next
week,
week.
We
absolutely.
understand
And
the
then just one more
structure.
thing before you go, just wanna make sure I understand it, you've got DVD, flash drive, other storage devices containing all images and electronic files on the project. Do we know if we have any system limitations, like if we want people to do a 3D visual and wanna be able to log onto our website to see it, is there special programming or something that either we need to have or they need to provide it to us
They
in a
will need to
specific,
provide it to us,
in a
So maybe we
specific
put that in.
format?
in the
Okay, so
format
that's
that
a
will
good
work
point.
for them.
We should add that into the
Work for them,
requirement.
but not necessarily for,
Well, we would need to be able to replay it.
They
right,
could-
that's my point.
We can maybe put a widget on the website that brings it to you. in
Yeah,
a series site.
we have great consultants that can help us with the technology if we run into that.
So, this will be on the agenda for next week.
Yep.
Sabrina, thank you for introducing it and giving us a summary. So, the thing, we spent years, we spent years updating our comp plan. We are now, we've had a couple of meetings with our planning board regarding executing the comp plan. We've spent months now with this RFP for a zoning study and everything that you explained. And I think there's a concern that you know, there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon, a lot of applicants have come to you and asked, when are you guys executing the comp plan, and when's this happening, when's that happening? And, you know, we're concerned that, you know, there could be new applications that basically thwart some of the goals that we're trying to carry out. So this moratorium would essentially freeze
I think
those
moratorium needs a
applications.
little more explanation.
right, but this moratorium will freeze some of those applications so that we can then go forward with some of the things that we've spent years getting to this point.
Right, so let me talk about the moratorium and local law in terms of concept, process, and the law itself. As the supervisor said, the concept of the moratorium is to provide a freeze to preserve the status quo. You've adopted your comprehensive plan, you've had some public meetings, there's interest in this redevelopment, and you're going out to an RFP. So you wanna make sure that the vision the public had and the vision you had when you adopted the 2017 plan can be implemented. So if people start building what's currently permitted, that's gonna make it less likely that what your vision is will be allowed to prohibit, because if someone's putting in thousands of dollars now to something, less likely to redevelop it. So New York State law recognizes municipalities have a right, when we're looking at zoning, when we're looking at redevelopment, to hit that pause button, preserve the status quo, and allow the board to make sure there's not a race to the building department. So you're telling, with this local law, you're telling property owners and developers, pause, we're going to freeze things while we look at how we would implement the vision that the public has and the town board has in its comprehensive plan. So the process is, there's called the moratorium, it's a local law. So you adopt a local law like any other local law, you introduce it, you schedule a public hearing, and you refer it to the planning board and the county planning board for review and comment. It's not subject to SECRA. New York State has recognized type 1 action exempt from SECRA. And so you can just adopt it, in a relatively quick period of time. And it's meant to do that so you can preserve the status quo, as I keep repeating. So the local law has a couple of components to it. And you have a draft in front of you. But first is the legislative intent and purpose. And it's important to let the community know why you're doing this, because moratoriums, it's seen sometimes as a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, and sometimes they drag on. So you want to make sure people understand what the process is. Newcastle is, in my view, introducing this at the right time, because there are some communities that will introduce a moratorium, and then it sits there, they don't move it forward, and they don't have planners hired. You actually have had some pre-meetings with the planning board, you're talking about the RFP process, so you're introducing, in my mind, the moratorium at the right time, where the interest is there. So the legislative history in paragraph 1 states that on June 21st, pursuant to the town law, you adopted the 2017 comprehensive plan setting forth goals and principles for redevelopment of the community. Paragraph 2, we're stating that with respect to the town's existing hamlets, including the downtown Chappaqua hamlet, the comprehensive plan establishes the goal of creating a new and vibrant mix of retail residential uses, housing that meets the needs of young and old adults. Chappaqua Hamlet's well connected to the railroad. In addition, the plan calls for the creation of design guidelines for retail and commercial establishments within the Chappaqua Hamlet, which is the form-based zoning that Sabrina mentioned. And what's also important about this moratorium is that it's selective and it's targeted. You have a 2017 comprehensive plan that says a lot of things about a lot of different areas in your town, and you're not imposing a moratorium town-wide. You're imposing it on a very discrete area where you've backed it up with pre-meetings, where you've backed it up with the RFP, and so you're gonna focus on it, and it's a more achievable goal that way. So in paragraph 3, 4, and 5, you're also putting more of the why are we doing this? And in paragraph 4, based upon the foregoing, the town board anticipates retail and commercial zoning changes are necessary, desirable, and imminent. And in 5, the moratorium will allow adequate time for the town to implement new retail and commercial zoning legislation for the hamlet. Town board finds that maintaining the status quo will be protective of the public interest and welfare and ensure consistency with newly adopted zoning regulations. And this moratorium will promote careful community planning values by regulating land development based on a carefully considered plan and prevent a race of diligence by those seeking to obtain approvals before new conditions and requirements are established. So that's your legislative history, consistent with what you've discussed over the past several months and what Sabrina had expressed tonight in that RFP. So what is the actual law? The law is contained in paragraph 3. This is the imposition of the moratorium. So it states that effective immediately and continuing for 6 months. 6 months is the typical time period, and you can extend it, and as long as you're maintaining the process and going through it, courts will uphold if you need to extend it. So period of 6 months. All the town board agencies, departments, etc. shall not accept, process, review, or consider any new applications for site development plan approval, special permit approval, variance relief, building permits, or sign permits in the BR, retail business, and the BRP, retail business and parking districts in the Chappaqua Hamlet, as depicted on the next zoning map, which you have before you, and which is also attached to the law. And we can go through in more detail when we have a public hearing itself. Any new applications received after the introduction of this local law, remember I mentioned the race to the building department. So this law says the moratorium is effective as of today, October 30th. And so if you submit it afterwards or before its effective date, you're subject to the moratorium. And any applications received on or before October 30th are exempt from the moratorium. Additionally, in paragraph 2, notwithstanding the moratorium, it shall not apply to any application for building permits received after today, October 30th, for work and improvements that the building inspector reasonably determines are being performed primarily for health and safety reasons. Someone has to widen a doorway for an ADA, someone has to put a fire suppression system in, you're gonna allow it. Or will be undertaken in existing commercial or retail structures having a gross floor area of less than 3,000 square feet. So those are your two exemptions that you have.
And why is the 3,000 square feet, why is that limited?
That was in there in terms of looking at the type of development that would occur, the type of reuses that would be reasonable, not require larger investment. So for example, someone coming in and, extreme example, tearing down an existing building, that you'd want to prevent.
Yeah.
Someone coming in and taking a small restaurant and putting in another small restaurant, 3,000 square feet, that's relatively small, it's not a big investment. It's something where, when you adopt these new regulations, a property owner is more than likely going to be able to recoup their investment by selling it based upon what the new zoning would allow. So that was sort of the, some of the thinking behind it.
Okay.
Yep. And then in paragraph 3.
And I think we're also trying to undertake some protections for small businesses, so trying to look out for
It's
sort
a
of.
gross floor area of 3,000 square feet, so if they wanted to, change the area of a closet, shift it so they have more floor area or floor space and they're 3,000 square feet of gross floor area or less, then they can do that still, and we're not stopping them at the moment because the changes in that size structure are not necessarily gonna change over time.
So paragraph 3 just repeats what I said earlier about being able to extend it. Paragraph 4, under the law, you have to provide a variance procedure. So if someone has a severe financial hardship, they can come to the town board, and you're the board, and you would consider that after public hearing, and then determine if there is good cause exists for granting a variance, a waiver, if you will, due to severe financial or economic hardship directly caused by the adoption of the moratorium. And then just some legal language, severability, effective date, and that this section provides notice to all applicants that although an exempt application may proceed through the review process, the application proceeds at its own risk. So you're allowing applications filed before today to proceed, but if you change the zoning and they're not through the process, they're on notice. They have to comply with the new zoning that is in effect at the time they go to pull that building permit.
So it behooves them to make sure they know what's going on before they
Yes.
do anything substantive.
Yeah, absolutely, and to work diligently with the building department. There are some applicants who are they stay on the agenda for several months, so this will encourage them to move through the process.
I think also potential investors are on notice that we are 100% looking to make changes to our downtown pursuant to the comp plan, and changes are coming.
And when you say changes are coming, to be very clear, no one should expect that tomorrow when this is done, the streetscape are ripping up and doing, that's not what's happening.
No.
This is solely for zoning to allow
Yes.
our vision of the town and the community to be implemented at some point.
And the second piece of paper you have is a resolution that just introduces the local law, schedule a public hearing for November 13th, and refers it to the planning board and who would review it at their November 7th meeting, as well as to the county planning department.
Okay,
Thank you.
so,
Me and motion.
in your motion,
I make a motion to schedule a public hearing and make a referral on the proposed local law enacting a moratorium for the Chappaqua Business Hamlet. The resolution is to adopt the following resolution for a schedule of public hearing and making statutory referrals on proposed local law enacting a moratorium on development and land use approvals and permits in certain zoning districts within the Chappaqua Business Hamlet. Whereas the town board is considering the adoption of amendments to chapter 60 of the town code of the town of Newcastle concerning the regulation of retail, commercial, and residential uses in the Chappaqua Business Hamlet. And whereas the potential exists that the review and approval of new land use applications will thwart or otherwise be contrary to the amended zoning legislation which the town board ultimately adopts. And whereas the town board has introduced a proposed local law enacting a temporary moratorium on the review of new land use applications to protect and promote community health, safety, and welfare. And whereas the adoption of this moratorium is a type 2 action pursuant to the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, and accordingly no further environmental review is required. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board hereby refers the proposed local law enacting a temporary moratorium to the Town of Newcastle Planning Board and to the Westchester County Planning Department for comment thereon. And be it further resolved that the town board hereby schedules a public hearing on the proposed local law enacting a temporary moratorium for November 13th, 2018 at 8 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter is called on the agenda in the Assembly Room of Newcastle Town Hall, Chappaqua, New York.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I believe, is there anything on our agenda?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.